The restaurant had been closed for hours, but every light still burned inside. Ralph's in East Harlem didn't take reservations anymore, not from regular customers anyway. The dining room sat empty, chairs stacked on tables, floor mopped clean. But in the back, behind a door most patrons never noticed, 9 men waited in silence. They represented more combined power than the mayor's office, more wealth than most Fortune 500 companies, and more capacity for violence than any legitimate authority could imagine. Carlo Gambino sat at the head of the arrangement, flanked by men whose names appeared in federal files thick enough to stop bullets. Dominic Catano had personally ended 40 lives or so, the whispers claimed. Vincent DeMarco earned his nickname the Iceman through methods nobody discussed in polite company. Salvatore Proface, Anthony Russo, and 4 other capos whose identities the FBI had never confirmed, all gathered for a single purpose. They were there to execute Frank Lucas. Not arrest him, not negotiate with him, just remove him from existence as efficiently as possible. The plan carried brutal simplicity: allow entry, secure the exit, 9 weapons against 1 unarmed target. By dawn, the problem would be solved, the body disposed of, and business could return to normal operations. Nobody anticipated complications. This was a certainty, a foregone conclusion, a necessary correction to restore proper order. Then the clock reached 2:47 in the morning, and everything those men believed about power got challenged in ways they never expected. Understanding what transpired during those 47 minutes requires context about who Frank Lucas actually was. By late 1969, he wasn't operating as just another street dealer trying to carve out territory. He'd accomplished something the Italian families considered impossible. He'd shattered their 3-decade stranglehold on heroin distribution throughout the entire northeastern corridor. For 30 years, the mob controlled every gram that entered American cities. The French Connection pipeline brought pure product from Marseille through Corsican intermediaries, all flowing through Italian-controlled channels. Every independent operator paid taxes, 10% to the families, 20% to local distributors. By the time product reached consumers, it had been diluted to 5% purity and marked up by factors that generated billions in profit. The system functioned perfectly, protected by violence so consistent that competition simply didn't exist. Then Frank Lucas bypassed the entire apparatus. In 1968, he traveled to Bangkok and connected directly with Leslie Ike Atkinson, a military sergeant with access nobody else possessed. Together they arranged procurement from Golden Triangle suppliers, pure heroin from Thai poppy fields at $4,200 per kilogram. The Italian families were paying $50,000 for identical product. Frank established smuggling routes using military transport, the specifics lost to speculation, some claiming coffins, others suggesting furniture shipments. The method mattered less than the result. By 1969, Frank's Blue Magic brand saturated every major market from Harlem to Baltimore. His product tested at 10 to 12% purity, sold at prices matching mob heroin, but delivered double the potency. Dealers abandoned their traditional suppliers overnight. Why maintain relationships with the Italians when superior product came cheaper from Frank Lucas? The 5 families attempted every standard response. They deployed collectors to intimidate Frank's distribution network. Those collectors came back dead or didn't come back at all. They attempted bribing Frank's suppliers. Frank had secured exclusive arrangements that couldn't be broken with money. They tried disrupting his distribution infrastructure. Frank built his own system using his 5 younger brothers from North Carolina, people whose loyalty was absolute because it was blood. The families called them the country boys, a dismissive term that underestimated their effectiveness completely. By October 1969, the mathematics were undeniable. Frank Lucas generated $1 million daily. The Italian mafia hemorrhaged $10 million weekly. That's when Carlo Gambino convened the emergency session. 5 nights before Frank's invitation, Gambino's social club in Little Italy hosted representatives from all 5 families. The agenda contained a single item: the Frank Lucas problem. Gambino at 63 commanded more respect than any boss since Lucky Luciano established the modern commission. He'd survived 4 decades in an occupation where most men died young or imprisoned. He'd outlasted Genovese, Profaci, Bonanno, every challenger and rival. His strategic mind had navigated every crisis the families faced. But Frank Lucas represented something different. Something that didn't respond to traditional solutions. "We've hemorrhaged 40 million in 6 months, Gambino stated, his tone carrying the temperature of winter. 40 million because one individual decided our permission was optional. Simple solution, we eliminate him." Dominic Catano offered immediately. "We've attempted elimination for 12 months, Vincent DeMarco corrected. 3 separate operations, all failures. His security protocols are impenetrable. Then target his family," Salvatore Proface suggested. "His brothers, his suppliers, his network. Apply pressure until he collapses." Gambino dismissed this with a headshake. "Consider the sequence. We eliminate his brother. He responds by killing 10 of our soldiers. We target his dealers. He targets our capos. This individual doesn't fear warfare. He emerged from nothing, possesses nothing to lose. Engaging Frank Lucas in prolonged conflict means eventual victory for us. Certainly, but the cost will exceed millions more and attract attention we can't afford. So what's your recommendation?" Catano demanded. Gambino settled back in his chair. "We bring him here face to face, all of us present. We demonstrate that regardless of his financial success, he cannot survive without our approval. We present 2 options, collaborate with us and prosper, or oppose us and die poorer. If he refuses, we resolve the matter immediately. 9 against 1. Quick, clean, problem eliminated." The vote passed unanimously. The invitation was prepared. 2 days later, Frank Lucas sat in his office above the heroin processing facility on 1116th Street when his cousin Jimmy Z entered carrying an envelope. Hand-delivered, no return address indicated. Frank opened it carefully. Inside lay a single card, expensive stock with embossed lettering. "Frank Lucas is invited to dinner at Ralph's Restaurant, 45 East 1140th Street, October 15th, 2 a.m. Attendance is mandatory. C.J." Frank studied the card silently. Jimmy recognized his expression immediately. "Boss, that's Gambino's location. It's an ambush." "Obviously," Frank responded quietly. "Then we decline. Send word we're unavailable." Frank looked up. "And what follows?" "They dispatch 50 soldiers to my residence. They detonate my vehicle. They abduct my wife." He placed the card down. "No. They requested a meeting. They'll receive one. Frank, entering that location alone is suicide. I won't be alone. I'll be armed with the only weapon that matters." "What weapon?" Frank smiled. "Information." The next 72 hours demonstrated something most men lack, either the intelligence or courage to attempt. Frank Lucas researched his adversaries. Not just Carlo Gambino, all 9 individuals who would occupy that room. He directed his people to acquire everything. Financial documentation, family circumstances, business complications, vulnerabilities. Frank discovered that Dominic Catano's son was destroying family capital through gambling. He learned that Vincent DeMarco's brother faced federal indictment with 20 years exposure. He identified that Salvatore Proface's Sicilian drug shipments had been intercepted by customs 3 times in 6 months. He found that Anthony Russo's legitimate restaurant ventures were bleeding money catastrophically. Frank invested 72 hours absorbing everything about the men planning his execution. Because Frank Lucas understood something the mob had forgotten during their dominance. Information constitutes power, and whoever possesses superior knowledge controls the outcome. When that black Cadillac arrived outside Ralph's at 2 a.m., Frank Lucas emerged wearing a charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection, gold timepiece visible, diamond ring catching streetlight. He projected businessman, not criminal. He approached the entrance where 2 massive bodyguards blocked his path. Arms up, they conducted a thorough search. Checked for weapons, wires, anything. Found nothing. "He's clear," one reported into a radio. The door unlocked from inside. Frank walked through the empty dining area. Tables arranged, settings placed, but zero customers. Ralph's had ceased public service after the mob acquired it. He reached the rear room with its heavy oak door. Voices audible inside, low and serious. The door opened. Frank entered. 9 men surrounded a long table. Carlo Gambino positioned at the head. Others arranged by hierarchy and family affiliation. Every eye fixed on Frank. Not with rage, but with certainty. They believed this gathering had one conclusion. Frank Lucas dead on the floor. "Mr. Lucas," Gambino said, gesturing toward an empty chair at the table's opposite end. "Please sit." Frank walked to the chair, sat down, adjusted his cufflinks, surveyed the table slowly, establishing eye contact with each individual, then returned his attention to Gambino. "Impressive establishment. I understand the cuisine is exceptional. Will you feed me before attempting murder, or should I expect that afterward?" Silence flooded the room. Dominic Catano leaned forward. "You've got nerve, I'll acknowledge that. Entering this location, making jokes." "I'm not joking," Frank said. "I'm simply curious about the procedure, because if you wanted me dead, you possessed 100 different methods. Vehicle bomb, sniper, poison, but you didn't employ those. You invited me to dinner. That indicates you want conversation." Gambino studied Frank extensively. "Intelligent. You're correct. We do want to discuss your business. My business is thriving. Appreciate your concern. Your business," Gambino continued, voice hardening, "is destroying our business. You're distributing heroin in our territory without authorization. You're undercutting our prices. You're stealing our customers. That concludes tonight." "Or what?" Frank asked calmly. "Or you don't exit this room," Vincent DeMarco stated, hand moving toward his jacket. Frank didn't flinch. "Before you draw that weapon, Vincent, let me ask something. How's your brother Paulie? Still facing 20 years for racketeering?" Vincent's hand froze. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I asked about your brother, because I heard the federal government has him completely. Wiretaps, financial records, testimony from 3 witnesses. And I also heard that if someone could make those witnesses unavailable, or perhaps provide the authorities with a larger target, Paulie might walk free." Frank paused. "That's worth considering, wouldn't you say?" The room's temperature dropped dramatically. Gambino raised his hand. "Vincent, sit down." Vincent sat, but his eyes never left Frank. Gambino leaned forward. "You're threatening us in our own establishment." "I'm not threatening anyone," Frank said. "I'm simply making conversation. Like how Dominic's son Tony Jr. lost $200,000 at the Tropicana last month. Family money, correct? That must be humiliating. Or how Salvatore's shipments keep getting intercepted by customs 3 times in 6 months. That's not misfortune. That's an informant in your organization." Salvatore Profe stood abruptly, chair scraping. "You calling me compromised?" "I'm not calling you anything," Frank said, maintaining calm. "I'm stating you have a problem, and problems like that get people killed unless someone assists you in finding the leak." Gambino stood now too. The entire room balanced on the edge. Weapons within reach. Violence seconds away. "You enter this location alone and believe you can blackmail all of us?" Frank finally stood, slowly. He straightened his jacket. Then he spoke the words that altered everything. "I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm offering you a business proposition. You came here to kill me. I came here to rescue your business." The silence was absolute. Gambino stared. "Explain." "You're hemorrhaging millions because I'm distributing superior product at better prices. But understand this. I don't want your territory. I want your distribution network. You possess infrastructure in 20 states, ports, politicians, protection. I possess the supply, pure product, from the Golden Triangle, at $4,200 per kilogram. You're paying $50,000 from the French. I can sell to you at $25,000. You process it, distribute it, maintain your territory, and generate more profit than you're making currently. And I don't have to worry about you attempting to kill me bi-weekly." The silence stretched. Breathing audible. Someone's watch ticking. Finally, Dominic Catano laughed. You enter this room full of men who want you dead and attempt to sell us heroin? I'm not trying to sell you anything, Frank said. I'm trying to make you wealthy again. Currently, you're at war with me and losing. Your dealers are switching to blue magic because it's superior. Your profits are declining. Your families are questioning your leadership. You kill me tonight, you feel satisfied for 10 seconds. Then tomorrow, you're back to losing money because my brothers assume control of operations and nothing changes. Or you partner with me. You purchase wholesale. You distribute. You generate 10 million monthly instead of losing it. Frank surveyed the table. Every man in this room has a problem. Dominic, your son's gambling debts. Vincent, your brother's legal case. Salvatore, your informant. Anthony, your restaurants are hemorrhaging capital. Carlo, your families are beginning to question whether you're still in command. He paused. I can assist with all of that information, capital, connections. Or you can kill me and continue drowning. Carlo Gambino hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He just stared at Frank Lucas with eyes that had witnessed everything. Finally, he sat down. Everyone out, boss. Dominic started. Out. The 8 other mobsters stood confused, angry. But you didn't disobey Carlo Gambino. They filed out individually, leaving Frank and Gambino alone. Gambino gestured to the chair nearer to him. Sit. Frank sat. Gambino poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle on the table. Slid one toward Frank. You've got courage, kid. Entering this location, talking to us like that. Most men would have lost control of their bladder. Most men don't possess what I have, Frank said. And what's that? The truth. I'm not your enemy. I'm your opportunity. Gambino sipped his wine. You know why I've survived 40 years in this life? Because I know when to fight and when to make deals. And you're correct. Fighting you costs me money. Partnering with you generates money, so we have an agreement. We have terms, Gambino said. You sell to us at $25,000 per kilogram. We purchase 50 kilos monthly minimum. You don't sell to anyone else on the East Coast. We handle all distribution. You receive your money, we recover our territory. Everyone profits. And the other problems I mentioned, you provide information when we require it. You assist Dominic's son with his debts. You assist Vincent's brother with his case. You locate Salvatore's informant. You do that. We protect you. Anyone attempts to hit you, they answer to us. Frank extended his hand. Deal. Gambino shook it. One additional thing, Frank. You ever betray us? Ever attempt to circumvent us? And I don't care how much heroin you possess. I'll incinerate it all with you inside. Understand? I understand. Gambino smiled. Good. Now exit my restaurant. And Frank, don't return to East Harlem unless I invite you. Frank stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. The 8 mobsters were waiting in the main dining area, all staring, waiting to hear what transpired. Frank walked past them without a word, out the door, into his Cadillac, gone. Inside, Dominic burst into the back room. Boss, what happened? Why'd you let him walk? Gambino finished his wine. Because that man is either the most intelligent or the most insane person I've ever encountered. And either way, he's worth more to us breathing than dead. But he's taking over Harlem. No, Gambino said. He already took over Harlem. Now he's given us the opportunity to profit from it. We purchase from him at $25,000, sell at $50,000, and we're generating more than we made with the French connection. Plus, he resolves problems we've been attempting to solve for months. He looked around at his men. We didn't lose tonight. We adapted. That's how you survive in this business. You adapt or you die. Word spread through the criminal underworld like wildfire. By morning, every mobster from Boston to Baltimore knew what happened. Frank Lucas entered a room with 9 mob bosses and exited with the deal of the century. The 5 families stopped attempting to kill Frank, started purchasing from him instead. For the next 6 years, Frank supplied heroin to half the East Coast, generated hundreds of millions, lived like royalty until 1975 when Detective Richie Roberts finally brought him down. But here's what nobody discusses about that night at Ralph's. Frank Lucas didn't prevail because he was tough. He prevailed because he was intelligent. He entered that room knowing more about his adversaries than they knew about themselves, and he used that information not to threaten them, but to make them dependent on him. The most dangerous weapon isn't a firearm. It's knowing what your enemy wants before they realize it themselves. It's transforming a death sentence into a business deal. Carlo Gambino survived another 7 years after that meeting, died of a heart attack in 1976. But before he died, a reporter asked him about Frank Lucas. "You tried to kill him once, correct? What changed?" Gambino smiled. "I realized he was more valuable as a partner than as a corpse. That's the difference between a gangster and a businessman. A gangster eliminates his competition. A businessman makes them work for him." The lesson from that 47-minute meeting echoes through every negotiation that followed. Power isn't about who has the most guns in the room. It's about who has the most information, who understands leverage, who can transform enemies into assets. Frank Lucas walked into that restaurant as a target and walked out as a supplier because he understood that every man has problems, and the person who can solve those problems becomes indispensable. Think about the psychology of what Frank accomplished. 9 men, each one a killer, each one representing an organization built on violence and fear, all convinced they were about to commit murder. And one man, unarmed, outnumbered, sitting in a chair at the far end of the table, transformed the entire dynamic by demonstrating he knew their secrets, understood their weaknesses, and could offer solutions they couldn't refuse. Dominic Catano's son wasn't just gambling. He was gambling away family money, which meant Dominic was facing questions from the commission about whether he could control his own household. Vincent DeMarco's brother wasn't just facing charges. He was facing charges that could lead to testimony, to cooperation, to the kind of exposure that could bring down entire families. Salvatore Proface's shipment problems weren't just bad luck. They represented a vulnerability that made him look weak, incompetent, possibly compromised. Frank Lucas didn't just know these things. He knew them in detail with specifics in ways that made clear he had sources, intelligence capabilities, reach that the families hadn't anticipated. And instead of using that information to threaten, which would have guaranteed his death, he used it to demonstrate value. He positioned himself not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as an asset to be utilized. Consider the alternative. If Frank had walked into that room and tried to intimidate them, tried to threaten exposure, tried to leverage their secrets against them, they would have killed him on the spot and dealt with the consequences later. But he didn't threaten. He offered, he presented solutions. He showed them how partnering with him would solve problems they were already struggling with, while generating profits they were currently losing. The genius wasn't in having information. Lots of people had information about the mob. The genius was in how he deployed that information, how he framed it, how he made it serve a larger purpose that aligned his interests with theirs. He didn't walk in saying, "I know your secrets, so don't kill me." He walked in saying, "I know your secrets, and I can help you solve the problems they represent. And by the way, I can also make you wealthier than you are right now." That's the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is knowing things. Wisdom is knowing how to use what you know in ways that change outcomes. Frank Lucas possessed both. When Gambino dismissed the other 8 men from the room, that moment represented a crucial shift. Gambino recognized something the others hadn't yet grasped. This wasn't a threat to be eliminated. This was an opportunity to be explored. A lesser boss, someone more concerned with ego than economics, would have refused to meet privately, would have demanded the execution proceed as planned, would have chosen pride over profit. But Gambino hadn't survived 40 years by making ego-driven decisions. He'd survived by recognizing when circumstances changed, when old strategies no longer worked, when adaptation was required. Frank Lucas represented exactly that kind of circumstance. Fighting him was costing millions. Killing him would feel satisfying but wouldn't solve the underlying problem, because his brothers would assume control and the blue magic pipeline would continue. The only solution that actually addressed the situation was partnership. Frank Lucas proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's information. It's understanding. It's the ability to see what others miss and use that vision to reshape reality in your favor. 9 mobsters planned a murder that night. 1 man planned a business deal. The man with the plan walked out alive and wealthy. The 9 mobsters walked out as his business partners. That's the power of strategic thinking applied to impossible situations. So when you're facing your own impossible situations, when you're outgunned, outnumbered, when every logical analysis says you're going to lose, remember Frank Lucas at Ralph's restaurant. Remember that power isn't about who has the most weapons. It's about who has the best information and knows how to use it. It's about transforming conflicts into partnerships, threats into opportunities, death sentences into business deals. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's what Frank Lucas taught everyone who heard the story of what happened in that room. In the drug game, respect wasn't given, it was earned. And Frank Lucas earned it by being smarter than everyone else at the table.